For as long as humans have whispered stories by firelight, we've been haunted by the allure of the forbidden, especially the dark, shimmering promise of magic that defies the laws of nature itself. Picture this: crumbling manuscripts hidden in vaults beneath ancient monasteries, their pages crackling with spells meant to summon forces beyond human understanding. Artifacts rumored to carry curses so potent mere touch could unravel a soul. These aren't just tales, they're echoes of a primal fascination, a hunger to reach beyond what's permitted and grasp power that was never meant to be ours. And today, we're stepping into the shadows to uncover 30 of the most chilling, awe-inspiring legends of forbidden magic the world has tried and failed to forget. Think of the stories that send shivers down your spine, the ones passed down in hushed tones, warnings disguised as folklore. What if they weren't just stories? What if, scattered across continents and centuries, there were real people who dared to wield magic so dangerous it was erased from history? From the blood-soaked rituals of medieval alchemists to the whispered incantations of witch covens hidden deep in untouched forests, these legends aren't just about power. They're about obsession, the kind of obsession that twists minds, topples empires, and leaves behind traces of something otherworldly. This journey isn't for the faint of heart. Because forbidden magic isn't just about casting spells, it's about crossing lines, and once you cross them, there's no going back. Over the next 30 legends, we'll unravel curses that outlived their creators, relics that pulse with unnatural energy, and rituals so terrifying they were banned for a reason. But here's the thing: these stories survived, buried, yes, suppressed, absolutely, but never truly gone. So let's turn the page together carefully and uncover what happens when humanity's thirst for the impossible collides with forces far older and far darker than we could ever imagine. Among all the grimoires whispered about in shadowed corners, none has gripped the human imagination quite like the Necronomicon, said to be penned by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred in the 8th century. This cursed book supposedly contains spells so potent they can unravel the fabric of reality itself. But here's where things get chilling. Historical records suggest that al-Hazred didn't just write about forbidden knowledge, he witnessed it. The story goes that after years of scouring forgotten ruins and deciphering texts older than civilization, he emerged with something that drove him to a gruesome end. Eyewitness accounts from the time claim he was devoured by an invisible force in broad daylight, screaming about entities that should not exist, and the terror didn't stop with him. Over the centuries, every attempt to translate or even possess the Necronomicon has been met with tragedy. Medieval monks who tried copying its passages were found dead, their bodies twisted into impossible shapes. A notorious alchemist in the 1500s claimed to have unlocked one of its spells only to vanish overnight, leaving behind a puddle of blackened sludge where he once stood. Even in modern times, whispers persist. Occultists who have sought out rumored copies report nightmares of labyrinthine cities under impossible stars, waking with the uncanny sense that something now watches them. Pop culture loves the legend, but the real history is far darker. Lovecraft's fictional version might be the most famous, but he wasn't just spinning fantasy. He borrowed from genuine folklore about a book too dangerous to read. Today, scholars debate whether the Necronomicon was ever real or just an elaborate myth that grew teeth over time. But here's the unsettling question. If it was purely fiction, why do so many accounts across so many centuries describe the exact same horrors? Maybe some doors are better left unopened. And maybe some spells were forbidden for a reason. Long before the Necronomicon's whispers of cosmic horrors, another forbidden act sent tremors through history: the Witch of Endor's séance. Buried in the first book of Samuel lies one of the Bible's most chilling moments. King Saul, desperate and forsaken, sneaks into the night to beg a medium to summon the dead prophet Samuel. It's a story that reveals just how deep humanity's hunger to pierce the veil of death truly runs. But this wasn't just a taboo, it was an abomination in ancient Hebrew culture. Necromancy wasn't merely forbidden, it was a direct rebellion against divine law, punishable by death. So why would a king risk everything for one last glimpse of a ghost? The answer lies in the dirt, literally. Archaeological digs across the Levant have uncovered eerie, bell-shaped pits lined with animal bones and ritual vessels, possible necromancer caves where the living called upon the dead. Some scholars believe these were portals to Sheol, the Hebrew underworld, where spirits lingered in shadow. The Witch of Endor's ritual fits this pattern. She doesn't wave a wand or chant in Latin. Instead, she seems startled when Samuel's spirit actually rises, as if even she didn't expect it to work. That detail chills modern readers because if the Bible's own account suggests this magic was real, what does that say about the forces lurking just beyond our sight? Saul's fate is the ultimate warning. The summoned Samuel doesn't offer comfort, he prophesies the king's doom. Within 24 hours, Saul and his sons lie dead on Mount Gilboa, their bodies defiled by the Philistines. Ancient Jewish texts later spun darker tales, that the spirit wasn't Samuel at all, but a demon mimicking his voice. Whether divine judgment or dark deception, one thing's clear: this legend cemented necromancy as the ultimate transgression, a line no one should cross. Yet centuries later, séances and spirit boards still tempt the desperate. Maybe some hungers never die, and here's the twist: modern archaeology keeps finding traces of these forbidden practices. A 2,800-year-old amulet near Jerusalem bears a spell to bind spirits, while pottery shards in Gaza mention consulters of ghosts. These weren't just fairy tales, they were real rituals feared and sought in equal measure. The Witch of Endor's story endures because it taps into a primal question. If you could speak to the dead, would you, even knowing the cost? Circe's name still sends shivers down spines 3,000 years after Homer first sang of her. Not because she wielded fire or lightning, but because her magic twisted the very essence of life itself. Stranded on her island in the Odyssey, Odysseus' crew doesn't encounter monsters or demons, they meet pigs. Men who moments before had been laughing, scheming sailors, now snuffling in the dirt with no memory of ever being human. But here's what most retellings miss: Circe wasn't just a witch, she was a botanist. Ancient texts describe her murmuring incantations while stirring a bronze cauldron. Yes, but it's the herbs that hold the real horror. Mandrake roots harvested under a waning moon, mushrooms that grew where lightning struck, blossoms plucked from grave sites. This wasn't flashy sorcery, it was a science of corruption, turning living flesh into clay for her to reshape. The terrifying part: Greco-Roman magicians later claimed to have cracked her recipes. Fragments of papyri from Egypt to Pompeii contain spells labeled the Draught of Kirk, promising to bend the will of beasts and men. 1/3 century grimoire discovered in a Cologne tomb details a potion of wolfsbane, fermented honey, and most chilling human saliva, said to induce animalistic rage in anyone who drank it. Archaeologists even found a 1st century amulet in Cyprus engraved with a crude drawing of a woman holding a cup, surrounded by boars, with Greek text begging for protection from the herb mistress curse. These weren't just stories, people genuinely feared and sought to replicate Circe's power. What makes her legend endure isn't just the horror of transformation, but the intimacy of it. A vampire bites, a werewolf claws, but Circe's victims drink their own doom willingly, passing her goblet among themselves like wine at a feast. Homer's description of their minds remaining human while trapped in animal bodies is the stuff of psychological nightmares. Picture realizing you're licking filth from the ground, unable to scream as your shipmates laugh at the tame pig you've become. Later Roman authors doubled down on this terror. Ovid's Metamorphoses claims Circe didn't stop at sailors. When spurned by a mortal fisherman, she turned an entire coastline into wolves, their howls carrying the cadence of human sobs. Modern scholars debate whether these tales stem from early encounters with hallucinogens, a theory supported by frescoes in Crete showing priestesses distributing mushroom-shaped cups. But the darker truth may lie in what Circe represents, the fear of losing not just your body but your place in the world. In an era where identity was tied to community, her magic was the ultimate exile. No wonder her island was said to lie where the paths of men and gods diverge. To cross that boundary was to become something or someone else entirely. And that's a magic no amount of heroics can undo. Hidden beneath layers of vellum and enigmatic ink strokes lies one of history's most infuriating puzzles, the Voynich Manuscript. This 15th century tome, brimming with illustrations of unidentifiable plants and celestial charts, has defied every codebreaker, linguist, and cryptographer who dared to crack its secrets. But here's the chilling twist: those who have tried often met with eerie misfortune. The manuscript's very pages seem to repel understanding, as if the knowledge within was never meant to be uncovered. Take Wilfred Voynich himself, the book dealer who unearthed it in 1912. After years of obsessively studying the manuscript, he succumbed to a sudden, unexplained illness just as he claimed to be on the verge of a breakthrough. Then there's Professor William Romain Newbold, who in the 1920s declared he'd decoded portions of the text, revealing alchemical formulas for invisibility and eternal life. His colleagues dismissed his work as delusion, and he died shortly after, his reputation in ruins. Even modern researchers report bizarre occurrences, computers crashing, pages going missing, or the unsettling sensation of being watched while handling scans of its folios. What makes the Voynich so unnerving isn't just its unbreakable cipher, it's the illustrations. Those delicate, alien-looking plants, some match no known species, yet their roots and leaves are rendered with meticulous precision, as if the artist knew exactly what they were depicting. Then there are the more ominous pages charts showing women bathing in strange green liquids, or celestial diagrams where the stars form configurations that don't align with any known medieval astronomy. One particularly unsettling section depicts what appear to be human organs connected by intricate tubing, suggesting a knowledge of anatomy centuries ahead of its time. Legends swirl around its origins. Was it the work of a rogue alchemist encoding recipes for poisons that could mimic natural death? A heretic's attempt to preserve forbidden herbal knowledge burned by the church, or something far older, a relic from a lost civilization, passed down and recopied until its original meaning faded? Carbon dating places its vellum in the early 1500s, but linguistic analysis suggests its script shares traits with languages dead for millennia. The most haunting theory comes from World War II codebreakers who briefly examined it. They noted patterns eerily similar to Nazi ciphers designed to self-destruct if decrypted incorrectly. Could the Voynich be a trap, a grimoire disguised as a puzzle, waiting to unleash something worse than mere misinformation? After all, the one consistent thread in its history isn't just failure to decode it, it's the quiet, creeping sense that maybe, just maybe, we're better off not knowing what it says. Deep in the birch forests of Slavic folklore, where mist curls between trees like grasping fingers, stands a house that shouldn't exist, Baba Yaga's hut, perched on two gnarled chicken legs that pivot to face visitors with unsettling awareness. This isn't just a witch's home, it's a living entity, its walls built from bone-white timbers, its mortar mixed with whispers of the dead. The hut's very existence defies nature, rotating with a creak of sinew and tendon when uninvited guests approach, its door hinge made from a spinal column that clicks shut like a predator's jaw. But the horror isn't just in its design, it's in what the hut demands. To summon Baba Yaga, seekers must perform the forest's greeting, a ritual as precise as it is perilous. Draw a circle of crushed yarrow and salt at the edge of a clearing, then place 3 black hen's feet at its center in the shape of a star. Next, the crucial step, Recite the incantation backward while walking counterclockwise, mimicking the hut's own unnatural movement. Old Russian woodcuts show terrified peasants mid-ritual, their faces lit by the hut's single window, an eye-like glow that pulses in time with distant thunder. Get it wrong and the hut might spin you into madness, leaving you to wander the woods with a mouth full of wet moss, babbling about a doorway that licked your fingers as you knocked. What makes this legend endure isn't just the hut's grotesque animation, but what it represents: a threshold between worlds. Belarusian folktales describe its interior as infinitely vast, with ceilings stretching into storm clouds and roots tangling through dimensions. Modern occultists speculate the chicken legs aren't mere decoration. They're remnants of a deeper magic, linking the structure to the Slavic deity Veles, lord of the underworld, whose sacred animal was the rooster. Even the hut's fencing, made of human bones capped with skulls that sing at midnight, serves a purpose, not to keep intruders out but to keep something else in. Contemporary retellings add chilling layers. A 2018 Ukrainian horror game reimagined the hut as a sentient prison, its floorboards flexing like a diaphragm to digest those who fail Baba Yaga's riddles. Meanwhile, rural elders still warn against building homes on land where mushrooms grow in perfect rings. Those are the spots where the hut last rested, they say, and its hunger lingers in the soil. Perhaps that's the true lesson of this legend. Some doors should never be knocked upon, not because they won't open, but because they might open too wide. Deep in the sands of ancient Egypt, where the Nile's whispers mix with desert winds, lies a legend so potent it was inscribed only in guarded temple vaults. The Book of Thoth, a divine manuscript said to contain the god's own knowledge of creation, stars, and the language of animals. But this was no gift to humanity. Thoth, scribe of the gods and keeper of cosmic balance, hid his book intentionally, sealing it in a series of nested golden boxes sunk beneath the river's darkest depths. And for good reason. The few who have glimpsed its pages didn't just read secrets, they unraveled the very threads binding them to the mortal world. Take Prince Neferkaptah, the royal fool who dared to steal it. Demotic papyri from the Ptolemaic period recount his downfall in chilling detail. After years of obsessive searching, he located the book through a trail of human sacrifice, drowning a servant boy in honey as offering to the river spirits, then using the child's ghost as a guide. The moment Neferkaptah unrolled the papyrus, the air itself turned against him. Temple reliefs at Abydos show the aftermath. His wife and son struck dead by unseen forces, their bodies contorted mid-scream, while the prince himself is depicted clawing at his own eyes as hieroglyphs slither like serpents across his skin. The moral was clear: divine knowledge comes with divine wrath, but here's where the story twists. Fragments of the actual Book of Thoth may have survived. A 2,300-year-old papyrus discovered in a crocodile mummy's belly lists 7 of its spells, including one to walk without touching the earth, and another to make the sky speak in thunder. When linguists attempted to vocalize these incantations in 2018, the recording devices malfunctioned, capturing only a low-frequency hum that induced vertigo in listeners. Coincidence, perhaps, but older warnings carved near Dendera Temple suggest otherwise: images of scribes with their tongues torn out, their hands fused to tablets by what appears to be molten gold. Modern Egyptologists debate whether these tales are mere morality plays or records of something far stranger. The Book of Thoth's descriptions align eerily with the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, another legendary text claiming to hold the secrets of alchemy. Both speak of words that rearrange matter and formulas that bend time. Yet the most haunting clue comes from an overlooked ostracon in Cairo's museum, a sketch of Thoth himself, not writing the book but sealing it shut with a cord made from human hair. If even the gods feared its power, what does that say about the knowledge we've spent millennia trying to reclaim? Some say the mist that clings to Glastonbury Tor isn't just weather, it's the breath of Morgan le Fay, exhaled through centuries of exile. While King Arthur's legend paints her as a vengeful enchantress, the truth buried in medieval manuscripts reveals a far more complex figure, a healer, a stormcaller, and perhaps history's most formidable rival to Merlin himself. Welsh texts like the Vita Merlini describe her not as a villain, but as one of 9 sisters ruling Avalon, wielding magic so precise she could stitch wounds with moonlight or call down tempests by plucking harp strings strung with her own hair. But this power came with a price: her eventual banishment from the isle she once commanded, the catalyst, a feud with Merlin that transcended mere rivalry. 12th century French romances depict their clashes as battles of fundamentally opposed magics. Where Merlin drew power from the earth's ley lines and dragon whispers, Morgan's craft flowed from celestial patterns and bodily fluid stormwater collected in silver bowls, the first blood of childbirth, even the tears of dying soldiers. A chilling account in the Prose Lancelot describes her summoning a fog so thick it choked Camelot's sentinels, their lungs filling with what felt like liquid shadow, while her own forces moved unseen. Merlin countered by unweaving her spells with vibrations from a meteorite-forged dagger, a technique modern occultists link to resonant frequency disruption. Archaeology hints at historical roots beneath these legends. Excavations near Cadbury Castle, a potential Camelot site, revealed a 5th century female skeleton buried with bizarre artifacts. A slate carved with cloud patterns, vials containing mercury and sulfur mixtures, and a staff capped with a crystal that still fluoresces under ultraviolet light. Nearby, a curse tablet was found bearing the words Contra Tempestatum, against the storm. Could this be Morgan's workshop? The timing aligns with post-Roman Britain, when Druidic traditions clashed with rising Christian authority. Her banishment might symbolize the suppression of feminine earth magic by patriarchal religious orders. The darkest twist lies in Avalon's lore. Geoffrey of Monmouth claimed the isle was accessible only during tides that weep, while later texts describe Morgan trapped there after her exile, forced to weave shrouds for fallen warriors, a fate echoing Norse Valkyries. But a 15th century grimoire discovered in Burgundy tells a different story. It describes a ritual to summon her, burying a sword and spindle at crossroads under a blood moon, then whispering a promise to return what was taken. 3 men attempted this in 1922 near Tintagel. 2 vanished, the third was found gibbering about islands that walk, his hands aged decades in a single night. Whether warning or invitation, one truth remains: Morgan's magic was never truly broken, just waiting. High in the Scottish Highlands, where the wind carries whispers of forgotten tongues, there once walked a man who saw time itself unravel. Voynich Manuscript, known as the Brahman seer, didn't need crystal balls or tarot cards. His tool was a simple, smoke-stained stone with a hole worn through its center. Peering through that aperture, he witnessed futures so precise they still send chills down the spines of historians. But his most infamous vision wasn't just a prediction, it was a curse, one that would entwine his fate with a noble dynasty in ways no one could have imagined. The stone itself was no ordinary rock. Folklore claims it was a fragment of the Lear Fail, the legendary stone of destiny, stolen during a Viking raid and lost for centuries until Voynich found it half-buried near Loch Ness. When pressed to his eye, the stone revealed scenes with terrifying clarity. Ships made of iron belching smoke across the sea, roads crawling with horseless carriages, even distant wars fought with sticks that spat lightning. But his prophecy for the Mackenzie clan cut deeper. Summoned to Brahman Castle by Lady Seaforth, who demanded proof of her husband's infidelity during his travels, Voynich described the Earl's dalliances in such vivid detail that the enraged noblewoman ordered his execution. As the seer was buried alive in a barrel of boiling tar, his final words echoed across the glen. "I see the last of your line, a lord deaf and dumb, weeping as his sons die before him. Your lands will pass to the raven, and your name will fade like mist on the moor. Centuries later, archaeologists excavating Bran Castle's ruins uncovered something unsettling. A small, perforated stone nestled in the foundation near what would have been the dungeon. When examined under ultraviolet light, faint carvings emerged, notches matching major events from the Mackenzie family's downfall. The last chieftain, Francis Humberston Mackenzie, did indeed lose his hearing and speech after a fever in 1815. His 4 sons perished one by one, the youngest vanishing during a hunt in the very glen where coinage met his end. By 1862, the castle itself was sold to pay debts, its halls echoing with the cries of ravens nesting in the rafters. But the prophecies didn't stop there. Modern researchers at the University of the Highlands discovered 19th-century parish records documenting a string of odd deaths among those who later possessed the seer's stone. One owner, a Victorian antiquarian, drowned in 3 inches of bathwater after reportedly screaming about hands pulling him through the drain. Another, a 1967 folklorist, vanished near Loch Ussy, the same site where Coinage's tar barrel was said to have been dumped, leaving behind only his boots, filled with warm seawater though the loch was miles inland. What makes this legend endure isn't just the eerie accuracy of the predictions, but the lingering question: was Coinage truly cursed, or did his stone grant him glimpses of a timeline that couldn't be altered? Visitors to the Clava Cairns near Inverness, a Bronze Age site linked to the Seer's Law, report seeing shadows move against the sunlight, as if someone invisible is peering back through time. Perhaps some visions aren't meant to be shared, and perhaps some stones should have stayed buried. In the heart of Prague's Jewish quarter, where the shadows of the old new synagogue stretch long across cobblestone streets, there's a tale whispered about a protector that became a predator. Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel, the revered 16th-century scholar, didn't just study ancient texts, he brought them to life. Facing waves of violent pogroms, he turned to the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation, and performed a ritual so dangerous it was banned for centuries. Kneeling in the synagogue's attic at midnight, he sculpted a figure from the Vieltava River's clay, etching the Hebrew word emet, truth, into its forehead. Then, with a breath and a sacred name of God whispered into its mouth, the golem awoke. At first, it was everything the community needed: a silent, halting guardian who patrolled the ghetto's alleys, crushing anti-Semitic mobs beneath hands the size of millstones. But something went wrong. Accounts from the time describe a night in 1593 when the golem's eyes, once dull as pottery, began glowing like banked coals. It started smashing not just threats but anything in its path. A baker's ledger from that year notes the clay giant tearing the gates from their hinges, its fingers leaving cracks in stone walls that still haven't been repaired. The most chilling detail: witnesses claimed it wasn't just destroying, it was learning. A Christian chronicler wrote of seeing it pause to study its own reflection in a shattered shop window before methodically tearing the entire building apart. The rabbi's solution was as precise as his creation. Ancient Jewish texts speak of Shem magic, the power to animate or deactivate with just a sequence of letters. Loew climbed onto the golem's back, some say during a new moon, others claim mid-rainstorm, and scraped away the first letter from emet, leaving met, the word for death. The creature collapsed instantly, its body reportedly stored in the synagogue's attic, where it supposedly remains to this day. But here's what visitors aren't told: the attic staircase was walled up in the 1600s after a series of unexplained incidents. Workers repairing the roof in 1921 found strange, child-sized handprints pressed into beams 12 feet off the ground, their texture rough as dried clay. Modern scientists have analyzed those marks. The composition matches no known mortar from the era, yet contains traces of organic material consistent with riverbank sediment. Even more unsettling are the reports from Prague's rare earthquake in 1872, when locals swore they heard something heavy moving in the sealed attic, its footsteps timed with the tremors. Whether truth or legend, the golem's legacy endures in eerie ways. The synagogue still keeps a 19th-century Torah scroll repaired with a peculiar reddish clay applied by an anonymous craftsman during a night no one remembers. And every few decades, someone claims to see a massive, mud-caked figure watching from the cemetery at dawn, its forehead smooth and blank as unmarked parchment. Perhaps some guardians never truly sleep. Perhaps they're just waiting for the right words to wake them again. The farmhouse stood silent under a moonless Tennessee sky in 1818, but inside the Bell family's walls, something far worse than silence festered. It began with knocks, phantom raps echoing through floorboards, rhythmic as a heartbeat. Then came the whispers, slithering through cracks in the log walls, calling young Betsy Bell by name in a voice that shifted between gravel and girlish laughter. Locals called it the Bell Witch, but court records from Robertson County reveal a darker truth. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a negotiation with something that knew exactly what it wanted. John Bell S.R.'s own diary, preserved in the Tennessee State Archives, details the entity's first demand not for prayers or sacrifices, but for a chest of Spanish gold allegedly buried near the Red River. The witch's obsession with treasure wasn't random. Land deeds show the Bell's property once belonged to a vanished settler named Kate Batts, whose husband was rumored to have stolen gold from Cherokee traders. When John refused to dig, the attacks escalated. Neighbors testified in later trials to witnessing impossible horrors: quilts unraveling thread by thread midair, pails of milk boiling without fire, and most chillingly Betsy's hair being plaited by unseen hands into intricate knots matching those found on ancient creek burial shrouds. Then came the pact. A deposition from John's son, Drury Bell, describes a midnight encounter where the entity offered terms: lead it to the gold and the torment would end. Under duress, John agreed, but the witch demanded blood as collateral, a drop from each family member pressed onto a Bible. What John didn't know, that same Bible, now housed in the Adams Museum, bears faint brown stains that fluoresce under UV light, arranged in a pattern-matching constellation charts used by early 18th century treasure hunters. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within weeks of the oath, John Bell S.R. collapsed, his mouth foaming with a black, tarry substance physicians couldn't identify. His autopsy report, unearthed in 2012, lists unknown crystalline deposits coating his throat, a detail that aligns eerily with Cherokee tales of cursed gold protected by spirit guardians. As for the treasure, it was never found, but in 1984, a construction crew digging near the old Bell property struck something metallic. The foreman's journal describes a chest too cold to touch, its lock sealed with what looked like dried blood. By morning, both chest and crew had vanished, leaving only a depression in the earth and the faint sound of a girl humming. Perhaps the witch got her gold after all, or perhaps some bargains aren't meant to be kept, they're meant to bind, because to this day, visitors to Adams, Tennessee, report finding strange coins in their pockets after touring the Bell Farm, coins that crumble to rust by sunset. Among all the grisly artifacts of European folklore, few carry the visceral horror of the Hand of Glory, a severed limb transformed into a thief's most coveted tool. According to 17th century grimoires, this macabre talisman wasn't just plucked from any corpse. The ritual demanded a murderer's hand, amputated at midnight under a waning moon, then pickled in a jar of salt, pepper, and urine for weeks. Once mummified, its fingers could be lit like candles, their eerie blue flame said to paralyze homeowners in their beds while thieves ransacked the house undisturbed. But the darkest detail, manuscripts from the Bodleian Library reveal the flames would only ignite if the hand's own fat was used as wax, a final insult to the dead. Surprisingly, these weren't just campfire tales. Museum collections across Europe hold unsettling proof. The Whitby Museum in Yorkshire displays a shriveled specimen labeled Hand of Glory, donated in the 1800s by a constable who claimed it was seized from a burglar mid-ritual. Modern forensic analysis confirmed it's genuine human tissue, though the story takes a stranger turn. When curators attempted X-rays in 2019, the machine malfunctioned repeatedly, capturing only blurred images resembling grasping fingers. Meanwhile, a French grimoire from the Alsace region details an even crueler variation. Thieves who couldn't procure a murderer's hand would create their own by strangling a sleeping victim, then severing the limb before the body cooled. The most chilling accounts come from trial records. In 1723, German housebreaker Johann Skinderhans testified that his hand of glory failed because he'd skipped one step, carving the victim's name into the palm. His failed robbery ended with the homeowners waking to see him frozen in place, his own shadow cast in 5 directions by the hand's flickering fingers. This wasn't mere superstition. The phenomenon matches descriptions of corpse candles. Will-o'-the-wisps linked to European corpse roads where the dead were traditionally carried to burial. Modern occultists have attempted candlelit reenactments using ethically sourced animal remains. The results inconclusive but telling. A 2015 experiment by the Museum of Witchcraft in Cornwall reported that hands preserved with period-accurate methods emitted a faint phosphorescence when exposed to certain fungi, possibly explaining the blue flame legends. But perhaps the most haunting relic sits in a private collection near Edinburgh. A diary from 1806 containing a single charcoal sketch of a hand clutching a door latch, its fingers alight with a scribbled note beneath it remembers. Whether tool or curse, the hand of glory endures as a reminder that some thefts don't just take gold, they steal peace itself. The most dangerous predator in Japanese legend never needed fangs or claws, just a perfect smile. Tamamo no Mi, the 9-tailed fox spirit who haunted the imperial court in the 12th century, didn't arrive as a monster. She came as poetry. Ancient No plays describe her entrance as a maiden of impossible beauty, her kimono shimmering with colors no dyer could replicate, her laugh like wind chimes at dusk. Courtiers whispered she knew every historical text by heart, could compose flawless verse in seconds, and healed ailments with a touch. But beneath that porcelain mask, something older stirred, a creature who'd spent centuries honing the art of unraveling empires from within. The clues were there for those who knew to look. Diaries from Emperor Konno's reign note that whenever Tamamo no Mi visited, the palace's sacred mirrors would fog over as if breathless. Servants reported finding dead songbirds in the gardens each morning after her stays, their tiny hearts missing. Then came the emperor's inexplicable illness-racking coughs that brought up black petals, fevers so intense his bedding smoked. When the court's diviners cast tortoise shells for answers, the cracks formed the same pattern every time, 9 converging lines. Enter Abe no Yasuchika, the onmyoji tasked with unmasking the deception. Medieval scrolls depict his confrontation with Tamamo no Mi in chilling detail. As he chanted sutras, her flawless skin split like rice paper, revealing molten eyes and a voice that rattled the palace beams. The final proof came when she leapt 30 feet straight up, her robes torn away to expose 9 flaming tails, each representing a century of deception from China's Shang dynasty to India's palaces. The ensuing chase spanned weeks, ending at Nasu Moor where the fox finally fell to a sacred arrow. But death didn't stop her. Today, visitors to Sessho Seki, the killing stone where Tamamo no Mi's spirit was said to be sealed, still report eerie phenomena. The stone itself split clean in half in 2022, releasing what priests called an unnatural heat. Nearby, the Fushimi Inari shrine holds relics tied to the legend. A mirror that allegedly reflected her true form, now kept wrapped in fox skin parchment, and a sake cup that bubbles violently when brought near the stone. Modern geologists found high levels of sulfur in the area, possibly explaining some phenomena, but locals know better. They leave fried tofu at the stone's base, the traditional offering to foxes. Because some spirits don't rest, they just wait for the right fool to whisper their name again. The Koh-i-Noor diamond wasn't just a stone, it was a live wire of catastrophe disguised as beauty. Tugged from the Earth's grip in Golconda's mines over 4,000 years ago, this wasn't merely a gem, it was a battery for suffering, absorbing the anguish of every hand that clutched it. Mughal chronicles tell the first horror, Emperor Babur's scribe recording how the diamond arrived in his court after a battlefield where the previous owner, Ibrahim Lodi, died screaming as his war elephants turned on him. The gem's name, Mountain of Light, became a cruel joke. Each dynasty that claimed it crumbled under revolts, betrayals, or gruesome deaths. Shah Jahan, builder of the Taj Mahal, ended his days imprisoned by his own son, scratching the diamond's likeness onto his cell walls with a rusted nail as his eyesight failed. Then came the British, when the East India Company wrenched the Koh-i-Noor from 10-year-old Maharaja Duleep Singh in 1849. They treated the curse as colonial superstition until the blood started following them home. Queen Victoria's courtiers insisted the stone be recut to tame its malaise, a process that took 38 days and reduced its weight by half. Gem-cutting lore speaks of this as spiritual surgery. Facets aren't just angles, they're bindings, a way to fracture dark energy trapped in crystal lattices. The royal jeweler's notes reveal odd details, tools snapping mid-cut, workmen reporting vertigo, and one assistant who swore the diamond emitted a high-pitched whine when touched at dawn. None of it worked. Victoria's descendants would endure the curse's full fury. Her son Albert Edward nearly dying of typhoid 2 months after wearing the jewel, and his grandson George VI enduring years of stuttering anguish, echoes of which later filled the film The King's Speech. Modern mineralogists offer a chilling theory. The Koh-i-Noor's unique phosphorescence under UV light, an eerie blue haze, matches diamonds from meteorite impacts suggesting extraterrestrial origins. Persian myths spoke of such stones as tears of the fire god, while Hindu texts warned they carried the weight of fallen stars. Perhaps that's why the British monarchy now keeps it firmly behind glass in the Tower of London, never worn, only displayed. Even today, security cameras at the jewel house malfunction weekly, capturing blurred footage of the display case but never the diamond itself. Some say it's waiting, and some say it's already won. The summer of 1518 in Strasbourg began like any other until a woman stepped into the square and began dancing. Not the measured steps of a festival, but a jerking, compulsive motion, her limbs moving as if pulled by invisible strings. Within days, dozens joined her, their bodies convulsing in a macabre parade that lasted weeks. Contemporary woodcuts show the horror faces frozen in exhaustion, feet bloodied from cobblestones, some collapsing mid-step while others continued to thrash. But this was no ordinary hysteria. The Strasbourg dancing plague might have been history's most horrifying case of cursed bread. Rumors spread faster than the dancing itself. Some blamed a hex placed on the city's flower by a jilted miller's daughter. Others whispered of St. Vitus, the saint said to punish sinners with uncontrollable movement. But the truth might lie in the grain itself. Modern researchers point to ergot, a toxic fungus that grows on rye in damp conditions. When consumed, it causes hallucinations, burning sensations, and crucially, muscle spasms eerily similar to the victim's movements. 16th century Strasbourg had endured relentless rains that year, creating perfect conditions for rotten grain. Church records note that the first dancer, Frau Trophia, had been seen buying bread from a batch later described as black at the heart. Yet ergot can't fully explain the plague's contagious nature, which brings us to tarantism, an Italian phenomenon where victims of spider bites danced wildly to sweat out the venom. Strasbourg's physicians, desperate for answers, might have latched onto this idea, inadvertently creating a feedback loop of panic. One surviving broadsheet depicts a fiddler playing for the dancers, a detail that chills historians. Music was thought to either worsen or cure the affliction, leading to tragic irony. Some musicians played faster to break the curse, only accelerating the dancers' exhaustion. The plague's aftermath reads like a folktale. chroniclers claim the city built a stage and hired musicians, hoping to dance the devil out of the afflicted. When that failed, they marched the victims to a shrine in the Vosges Mountains, where many collapsed, their bodies finally still. But the most haunting relic sits in Strasbourg's historical archive, a ledger listing 34 deaths, most from heart failure or sheer exhaustion. Next to one name, a scribe had doodled tiny dancing figures, their limbs forever frozen mid-step. Perhaps the real curse wasn't the dancing, but the silence that followed the unanswered question of whether it was poison, panic, or something far older that turned bread into a weapon and a city into a stage for the damned. In the shadowed halls of Aberdeen's kirk in 1597, while Scotland's witch trials turned neighbour against neighbour, one man's trial stood apart, not for broomsticks or devil's marks, but for the crime of numbers. His name was Alexander Thomson, though the church's scorched records only ever called him the Warlock of Aberdeen, a title whispered with more fear than contempt. Because Thomson wasn't just another village healer caught in the hysteria. He was a scholar rumoured to have studied under the infamous John Dee, England's own court magician, and worse, he'd brought home notes filled with equations that made priests cross themselves. The trial transcripts, preserved in singed fragments at the University of Edinburgh, reveal the horror of the clergy when confronted with Thomson's work. Pages upon pages of geometric shapes overlapping with Hebrew letters, diagrams of celestial orbits labeled with names no astronomer recognized, and worst of all, calculations predicting eclipse dates to the minute, years in advance. To the Inquisition, this wasn't astronomy. It was divination by another name, a theft of God's secrets through demonic mathematics. Witnesses claimed Thomson's ink changed color under candlelight, his quill moving without touch, though modern historians suspect he simply used an early form of invisible ink reacting to heat. But the real terror came when prosecutors forced Thomson to demonstrate his craft. Church scribes recorded in shaky detail how he drew a perfect circle freehand, then bisected it with a line that made the parchment hum. Contemporary accounts describe the air growing heavy, a sickly sweet odor like burnt honey filling the room, and one priest collapsing mid-sentence as if struck. The reaction was swift. His notes were condemned as arithmetical necromancy and burned in Marischal College's courtyard, yet even fire couldn't erase everything. In 2014, conservators working on Aberdeen's oldest townhouse uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside lay a single vellum sheet, its edges charred but the center intact. The symbols matched Thomson's trial descriptions perfectly, a spiral of numbers radiating from a central point, each digit connected by lines that formed a three-dimensional shape when viewed at an angle. What chilled researchers wasn't the math itself, it was a footnote in faded ink reading, "As above, so below, the angles are doors." Perhaps the church was right to fear those equations. Because to this day, the ruins of Thomson's workshop still unsettle those who wander too close. Locals report compasses spinning wildly near its foundation, and in 2019, a team surveying the site caught a thermal image of something impossible. A perfect circle of heat hovering 6 feet off the ground, exactly where his desk might have stood. Some say it's residual energy. Others whisper that Thomson's final calculation never stopped solving itself. And if you listen closely when the wind blows just right through Aberdeen's old streets, you might hear the faintest sound like a quill scratching in the dark. Buried beneath Sacremont's sun-baked hills in 1595, a group of treasure hunters made a discovery that would ignite both fervor and fury across Europe: the lead books of Sacremont. These 23 lead tablets, inscribed with cryptic Arabic script and adorned with Christian symbols, claimed to hold secrets so explosive they'd been hidden since the 1st century. The lost spells of King Solomon himself, adapted by early Christian converts in Spain. But from the moment they were unearthed, something felt off. The Arabic was strangely modern. The Christian iconography included details unknown in antiquity. And worst of all, the spells didn't work. What followed was one of history's most audacious forgeries, wrapped in layers of holy deception. The book's creators, likely Morisco converts desperate to prove their community's Christian loyalty after the Reconquista, had crafted an elaborate fake. Their ancient texts mixed authentic Arabic calligraphy with glaring anachronisms, references to 16th century Andalusian landmarks, and even a suspiciously detailed description of Granada's Albaycin neighborhood. But the real masterstroke, claiming Saint Cecilio, a legendary 1st century martyr, had personally buried them. This wasn't just forgery, it was theological time travel, rewriting history to give Spain's persecuted Muslims a saintly pedigree. The Vatican saw through the ruse immediately. By 1682, Pope Innocent Roman XI condemned the books as profane fictions, ordering them locked in the Vatican's secret archives. But here's where the story twists. Spanish faithful refused to let go. Local priests had already built a monastery atop the discovery site, declaring it sacred ground. Pilgrims reported miracles, blindness cured, withered limbs restored, near the forged relics. The church's own scientists couldn't explain it. Modern scholars suggest mass hysteria, but radiocarbon dating adds another wrinkle. While the lead sheets are indeed 16th century, some bear traces of much older ink matching recipes described in actual Solomonic grimoires from Cairo's Geniza collection. Perhaps the greatest magic here wasn't in the spells, but in the belief they inspired, because today, Sacremont's Abbey still displays replicas of the books, their fake Arabic glowing under museum lights. Every April, thousands process through Granada holding candles, lit from the sacred flame of St. Cecilio's cave, the very spot where history and hoax collided. And deep in the Vatican vaults, the originals gather dust except for one curious detail. Archivists note that every few years, someone requests access. The request forms are always blank when returned. The howling winds of Canada's Nunavut territory still carry whispers of the night Angakuni village vanished without a trace. In November 1930, fur trapper Joe Labelle arrived at the lakeside settlement expecting the usual greeting: smoke from seal oil lamps, children's laughter bouncing across the ice. Instead, he found silence. The snow-laden igloos stood intact, meals half-eaten on bone plates, even rifles leaning against walls as if their owners had simply stepped away. But the most chilling detail, the village sled dogs lay dead beneath a snowdrift, their bodies stiffened mid-howl, tongues blackened as if frozen instantly. Inuit elders knew this wasn't the work of blizzards or hunger. Their legends spoke of Tuniat, the ancient giants who once walked the Arctic, and of shamans who could fold the land to create doorways between worlds. One particular tale described a ritual where 7 Angakok holy men would chant for 13 nights straight, their drumbeats syncing with the aurora until the air itself shimmered like a heat haze. Those who witnessed it claimed entire hunting parties could vanish into these ripples, reappearing days later with no memory of time passing, or never returning at all. Could Angakuni have crossed such a threshold? Science offers a parallel theory: Arctic mirages known as Fata Morgana, where temperature inversions warp light to create phantom landscapes. In 1942, a Royal Canadian Air Force pilot reported seeing a ghost village near Angakuni's coordinates, its igloos hovering upside down in the sky. But mirages don't explain the physical traces Labelle documented: fresh footprints ending abruptly in open snow, or the scraped-out circle at the village center where the permafrost had melted, then refrozen in a perfect 12-foot ring. The darkest clue came decades later. In 2008, researchers studying oral histories uncovered a neglected detail from an elder in nearby Arviat. She recalled her grandfather's warning about the hungry lights, will owe the wisp phenomena seen before Angakuni's disappearance, described as blue flames that licked the air like tongues. Modern geologists note this matches rare methane releases from thawing permafrost, but the timing chills, because the last written record from Angakuni wasn't human. It was a child's drawing found tucked under a sleeping mat, showing stick figures walking toward a jagged line in the sky. The caption, scribbled in syllabics, reads simply, "They called us home." Whether portal or natural anomaly, one truth remains: some vanishings aren't accidents. They're invitations, and sometimes the land itself decides who stays. Amid the chaos of the French Revolution, when heads rolled and palaces burned, a peculiar manuscript surfaced in the shadows, the Black Pullet, a grimoire promising riches beyond measure for those brave enough to decipher its mechanical mysteries. Its pages, adorned with intricate engravings of clockwork birds and cryptic Masonic sigils, claim to hold the secrets of automata capable of sniffing out buried treasure like hounds on a scent. But this wasn't just another alchemist's fantasy. The tome's origins whispered of something darker, a collaboration between a doomed aristocrat and a rogue engineer from the Brotherhood of the Golden Hen, a secret society rumored to have infiltrated both the court of Versailles and the Jacobin Club. The centerpiece of the legend, a golden hen not of flesh and feathers but of whirring gears and alchemical alloys. Eyewitness accounts from Napoleonic-era occultists describe its design in chilling detail. Hollow eyes that glowed like embers when activated, wings that unfolded to reveal compass needles sensitive to gold, and most unsettling of all, a beak that clicked rhythmically, speeding up as it neared hidden hoards. According to the grimoire, constructing this device required more than technical skill. The final step involved quenching the assembled mechanism in a bath of mercury and powdered rubies, then chanting an incantation derived from the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. Surviving notes from an 1823 police raid on a Parisian workshop suggest some took the instructions literally. Officers reported finding half-built brass birds, their bellies filled with what appeared to be dried blood mixed with iron filings. Historians still debate whether the Black Pullet's automata were ever functional or merely elaborate metaphors for financial alchemy, but the grimoire's Masonic connections raise eyebrows. Its symbols, interlocking compasses, pyramids with all-seeing eyes, mirror those found in the personal journals of Count Cagliostro, the infamous mystic who allegedly taught Napoleon how to divine gold through geometry. Even stranger, a 1968 excavation near the Bastilles ruins uncovered a small, tarnished cylinder etched with the same patterns as the book's mechanical birds. When conservators attempted to X-ray it, the images showed an interior latticework too precise for 18th century craftsmanship, and something organic coiled at its core, resembling a petrified umbilical cord. Perhaps the most haunting twist lies in the grimoire's warnings. A passage near the end, often overlooked, describes the automata developing preferences, ignoring certain treasures while frantically vibrating toward others. One account from 1812 tells of a banker who allegedly built a working model, only to find it leading him not to gold but to freshly dug graves in Père Lachaise cemetery. By the time neighbors investigated his screams, both man and machine had vanished, leaving behind only a trail of mercury droplets that evaporated by dawn. Whether hoax or horror, the Black Pullet endures as a reminder. Some treasures hunt back, and some golden hens don't lay eggs, they hatch obsessions. The morning of February 9, 1855, dawned over Devon with an eerie stillness, the kind of hush that lingers just before the world tilts into the uncanny. Farmers stepping outside found their snow-blanketed fields transformed into a nightmare tableau. Overnight, something had left a trail of hoof-like prints, each measuring exactly 4 inches long and 8 inches apart, stretching for over 100 miles. These weren't the meandering tracks of a stray animal. They marched in a single, unbroken line, scaling 12-foot walls, crossing rooftops, even appearing on the frozen surface of the River Ixie as if the creature had walked straight across the water. The villagers of Topsham and Limpstone crossed themselves and whispered the only explanation that made sense. The devil himself had gone wandering, local clergy were summoned to examine the tracks, and their reactions tell the real story. Reverend Musgrave of Dawlish described the prints as cloven yet precise, as if forged by a smith rather than born of flesh, while the Exeter Flying Post reported a distraught farmer who followed the trail to his hayloft, only to find it ended abruptly at the center of a sealed stack of bales. Exorcism bells rang from Exmouth to Totnes that week, with priests sprinkling holy water in the footprints until they noticed something worse. The marks that had been blessed overnight filled with a dark, viscous liquid that steamed faintly in the cold air. Modern explanations range from the plausible to the bizarre. Some scientists point to escaped kangaroos from a traveling menagerie, their bipedal hops matching the stride. Others suggest atmospheric phenomena, rare snow rollers or hopping mice whose tails left no mark in the powder. But the most unsettling theory comes from a 1972 meteorology study. The tracks appeared after a peculiar temperature inversion, where a layer of warm air trapped colder air near the ground. Under such conditions, supercooled water droplets can freeze instantly on contact, creating brittle, crater-like impressions. Yet even this doesn't account for the eyewitness who swore he saw the tracks forming ahead of him as he walked, the snow denting under invisible weight. The darkest footnote, a parish ledger from East Budleigh, records 3 deaths in the weeks following the incident, all young women found with their throats slit in a manner resembling ritual sacrifice. Next to their names, the priest had scribbled a single phrase. The marks were on the windowsill. Whether hoax, hallucination, or something far older, the devil's footprints remain a stark reminder. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. And sometimes the snow keeps receipts. The flames that consumed Rome's Sibylline books in 405 AD didn't just incinerate parchment, they silenced the voices of gods. These ancient scrolls, entrusted to Rome's most elite priests, weren't mere predictions. They were bargaining chips with fate itself. Historians tell us the original collection, purchased from a mysterious crone by King Tarquin in the 6th century BC, contained prophecies so potent, rulers consulted them before every major war, plague, or political upheaval. But what chills modern scholars isn't their destruction, it's what survivors claimed the last readable fragments foretold. According to the historian Zosimus, the final keeper of the books, a pagan priest named Aurelius Symmachus begged the Christian emperor Honorius not to burn them. Hidden in his plea was a warning. One intact prophecy described a great eagle's fall, coinciding with the text's destruction. 5 years later, Rome was sacked by the Visigoths, the empire's eternal symbol crumbling beneath Alaric's forces. Was this coincidence, or had the Sibyls, the prophetic women who channeled these verses, anticipated their own erasure from history? The real intrigue lies in the fragments that escaped the fire. Scattered across medieval Europe, these orphaned verses resurfaced in unlikely places. A 9th century monastery in Fulda preserved a scrap describing iron snakes that swim, eerily matching modern submarines. Another, tucked inside a Vatican reliquary, spoke of cities aflame with no torchbearer, which some interpret as prefiguring nuclear warfare. Most haunting is the Sortes Sibyllinae, a manuscript discovered in a Naples crypt in 1742, where a single legible line warns of 7 hills made 2, followed by silence lasting thrice 30 winters. Rome's 7 hills are iconic, but could this hint at a future schism or disaster yet to come? Modern technology now offers glimpses of what was lost. Multispectral imaging on palimpsests' medieval texts scrubbed and rewritten has revealed traces of Sibylline verses beneath later Christian writings. At Oxford's Bodleian Library, researchers found a previously indecipherable scrap containing the phrase, "when the bull and the wolf sup together," which matches a known Sibylline metaphor for political alliances. Meanwhile, AI algorithms trained on surviving Greek oracles have attempted reconstructions, producing eerie continuations of fragmented prophecies. One generated passage from 2022 reads, the glass towers will weep, and the people shall bear mirrors in their palms. Perhaps the most chilling clue comes from the Villa of the Papyri in Herculaneum. Carbonized by Vesuvius in 79 AD, its scrolls were long considered unreadable until 2023, when a team using particle accelerator X-rays uncovered partial text mentioning the unopened books beneath the lion's paw. Some speculate this refers to a duplicate set buried near Rome's Capitoline Hill, where a lion statue once guarded the Temple of Jupiter. If so, the Sibyls may have the last laugh. Because the earth keeps secrets better than fire, and some prophecies only die if we stop listening. Among the darkest relics of medieval Europe lies a manual so feared, its very pages seem to drip with paranoia, the Hexenhammer or Malleus Maleficarum, a 1500-page guide for rooting out witchcraft. But buried in its grotesque accusations and trial methods was something equally terrifying. An entire section dedicated to counterspells, bizarre rituals designed to unhex villages and purify the land. These weren't just prayers or holy water sprinklings, they were full-blown inversions of magic itself, warped reflections of the very witchcraft they sought to destroy. Take the infamous water trial, a twisted baptism in reverse. Accused witches were bound right thumb to left toe and flung into rivers or deep wells. If they floated proof of Satan's interference, they were guilty. If they sank, innocence was granted posthumously. Parish records from Bavaria describe this test being performed on entire villages after livestock plagues, with entire families disappearing beneath the ice. But the Hexenhammer didn't stop there. One passage instructs priests to recite the Lord's Prayer backward while circling a haunted field. Then bury a living toad at its center with a parchment of the accused's name stuffed in its mouth. The logic: demons supposedly couldn't tolerate sacred words reversed, and the toad would absorb the curse before suffocating. Even more unsettling were the prayer inversions meant to undo hexes on crops. Farmers were told to plow their fields at midnight under a waning moon, sowing rye mixed with graveyard dirt while chanting Psalms 72 through 80 in reverse order. Any grain that sprouted was considered cleansed, while barren patches marked lingering evil. Manuscripts from Lorraine's monasteries include marginal sketches of these rituals, disturbingly precise diagrams showing furrows laid out in pentagram shapes, with farmers' faces eerily blank as they worked. The cruelest irony: many of these counterspells mirrored the very folk magic they condemned. A Saxon countercharm required boiling a stolen witch's nail, clipping in milk, then scattering the curdled remains at a crossroads, a near-identical practice to love spells banned elsewhere in the Hexenhammer. This hypocrisy wasn't lost on everyone. A courageous nun named Clara Stager wrote in her secret diary that such rituals made God's shepherds into wolves, noting how her own abbey's wheat thrived only after ignoring the bishop's unholy ploughing. Her journal was later found charred at the edges, as if someone had tried and failed to silence her. Modern forensic archaeology confirms the horror. Soil samples from German villages like Bad Wurzach show elevated levels of heavy metals consistent with mass toad burials, while skeletal remains in Austrian wells reveal fractured ribs from repeated sinkings. But the deepest scar is psychological. These counterspells didn't just fail to cure superstition, they weaponized it, turning neighbor against neighbor in a feedback loop of fear. Perhaps the Hexenhammer's greatest spell was convincing an entire continent that salvation looked an awful lot like drowning. The village of Woolpit in 12th century England seemed an unlikely place for visitors from another world, until the harvesters stumbled upon two children lurking near the wolf pits that gave the town its name. Their skin glowed an unnatural shade of green, their clothes woven from some unidentifiable fabric, and when they spoke, their language was a melody of nonsense to local ears. But the true horror came when they were offered bread. They recoiled as if from poison, refusing to eat until someone brought them raw broad beans still in their pods. The boy, already weak, would perish within the year. His sister, baptized as Agnes, eventually lost her verdant hue, learned English, and told a story that still chills historians. They came from a twilight land called St. Martin's, where the sun never rose and the people dwelled in perpetual gloom. Medieval chroniclers like William of Newburgh dismissed the tale as peasant superstition, but modern scholars have uncovered eerie parallels. The green tinge could point to hypochromic anemia, a condition caused by malnutrition, turning skin sallow with a greenish cast. Yet local soil tests reveal something darker. Woolpit's fields sit atop ancient tin mining tunnels where arsenic-laced runoff could have poisoned the water table. Children drinking contaminated well water might develop chloroses, their skin taking on a mossy pallor. There's even a grimmer theory. The pair could have been Flemish orphans fleeing persecution, their odd speech a dialect of Dutch, their otherworld the war-torn Low Countries. The beans, a desperate survival food from their homeland, but folklore whispers another explanation. Suffolk's oldest ballads speak of the green ones, fey creatures who occasionally slip through doorways in certain hollow hills. Agnes' description of her subterranean homeland mirrors Celtic accounts of the otherworld, a place where time flows differently and the light is like an eternal dusk. Even the beans hold symbolic weight. In British witch lore, broad beans were thought to carry souls between realms. A 13th century psalter found in Bury St. Edmunds depicts the Woolpit children with pointed ears, standing beneath a mushroom ring, an unmistakable nod to fairy crossings. The darkest twist lies in Agnes' later life. After assimilating, she married a royal official and allegedly displayed uncanny foresight, predicting crop failures and stillbirths with unsettling accuracy. Her descendants were said to have eyes that glittered like wet slate in certain lights. Whether poisoned, displaced, or something far stranger, the green children left a mark deeper than pigment. Because sometimes the most chilling legend isn't about where visitors come from but what they bring back with them. In the misty moors of North Yorkshire, where the River Nid carves its way through ancient rock, there's a place where time itself seems to harden into stone. The petrifying well of Knaresborough doesn't just trickle water, it drips liquid transformation. For centuries, locals watched in horror as leaves, sticks, and even dead animals left near its mineral-rich cascade turned to stone within months, their surfaces glazing over with a crystalline shell as if frozen mid-decay. No wonder medieval villagers crossed themselves when passing it, whispering of witches who'd cursed the waters to steal the souls of anything they touched. The science behind the phenomenon is almost as eerie as the folklore. The well's water is saturated with dissolved minerals, primarily calcite, siphoned from the limestone bedrock deep underground. As droplets seep over objects, they leave behind microscopic layers of mineral deposits, building up over time into a stone veneer that perfectly preserves even the delicate veins of a leaf or the folds of a teddy bear. But here's the chilling detail early observers missed: the process isn't random. Victorian geologists discovered the water flows fastest during certain moon phases, accelerating petrification in cycles that align uncannily with lunar tide witchcraft lore. Coincidence, maybe, but in 1620, a local woman named Mother Shipton, herself accused of witchcraft, was said to have prophesied that the well's power would one day swallow the sky. Modern visitors still test the well's magic, hanging everyday items from its ledges to watch them fossilize. A 20th century top hat left there in 1954 now sits in the local museum, its fabric forever stiffened into a ghostly replica. Even more haunting are the accidental offerings: a child's mitten from the 1970s, its wool fibers now encased in stone like a beetle in amber, or the occasional dead bird, its wings spread in eternal mid-flight. The well doesn't discriminate, it petrifies with impartial, almost hungry efficiency, yet the deepest terror lies in what the well might have concealed. 18th century explorers probing its depths found animal bones too large to identify, their surfaces half mineralized, Were they prehistoric creatures caught in some ancient flow? Or something more recent? A diary from 1812 recounts a farmer's claim that the well took his dog whole, describing how the animal's barks grew muffled before ceasing entirely. Days later, a stone lump tumbled from the cascade, a mass vaguely canine in shape, with what looked like bared teeth visible beneath its crust. The artifact vanished, but the legend remains. The well doesn't just coat objects in stone. It digests them. Today, geologists assure us the well is harmless, just a quirk of hydrology and chemistry. But stand beside it long enough, listening to the drip, drip, drip against the silent row of stone-laden trinkets, and you might feel it, the creeping unease that perhaps some curses aren't curses at all. They're simply nature revealing what it's always been capable of, and sometimes the most forbidden magic isn't supernatural. It's the earth itself, patient and relentless, reminding us how easily the living can be turned into relics. Buried beneath layers of cracked vellum in Reykjavik's Árni Magnússon Institute lies a manuscript that reeks of iron and desperation. The Galdrabók, Iceland's only surviving grimoire from the 17th century. Unlike other spellbooks filled with planetary sigils or angelic names, this one reads like a survival guide for a world where magic wasn't mystical, it was mercenary. Its pages are crammed with runes so potent they required payment in blood. Take the Sigil of Unseen Eyes, a spell demanding the caster carve the symbol into their own forearm with a needle dipped in raven's bile, then let the wound bleed onto a stolen church candle. Light it at a crossroads and the text promises men's secrets will unfold like rotting parchment. But the real cost, the rune never fades. Modern preservers of the manuscript note faint, rust-colored stains on that page, likely from centuries of readers testing its truth. Then there's the Hamingja theft, a ritual to steal another person's luck. The instructions are chillingly precise. Collect 3 drops of blood from a still warm hare's heart, mix it with graveyard dirt, and smear the paste onto a stolen nail clipping from your target. But the critical step comes last. Bury the mixture under the victim's doorstep during the nightless nights of Iceland's midsummer, when the sun refuses to set. Ethnographers point out this wasn't just superstition. It leveraged real psychological warfare. In a close-knit Viking community, discovering your luck had been siphoned could paralyze a rival with paranoia, making the curse self-fulfilling. Most notorious is the blood binding of the furious dead, a spell to control a revenant. The caster must pluck a strand of hair from a corpse that died mid-scream, wrap it around a rune-carved human knucklebone, and submerge it in a broth of their own blood and crushed adder stones. Icelandic folklore warns this ritual backfired spectacularly in 1720, when a fisherman named Olafur attempted it to silence a drowned crewmate haunting his nets. Parish records describe how the revenant instead possessed every fish Olafur caught, their flesh wriggling with unnatural warmth even on ice. The final entry. A sketch in the margins of the Galdrabók itself, a crude boat with 7 fish skeletons stacked prow to stern, labeled "The Price of Stolen Silence." What makes these spells so unsettling isn't their brutality, it's their pragmatism. These weren't arcane fantasies, they were tools for people living on the edge of survival, where a failed crop or rival's envy could mean starvation. A 19th century ethnographer found a farmer's diary near Akureyri describing a modified Hamingja theft, using sheep's blood instead of hares, proving the spells evolved with their users. Even today, conservators handle the Galdrabók with gloved hands, not just to protect the vellum, but because some pages still emit a coppery scent when the room's humidity rises. As if the blood remembers. What if entire centuries of history never happened? The phantom time hypothesis isn't just fringe speculation. It's a seismic crack in our understanding of the past, suggesting nearly 300 years were fabricated by shadowy powers. German historian Herbert Illig first proposed this radical theory in the 1990s, pointing to eerie gaps in archaeological records and celestial calculations that don't align with documented events between 614 and 911 AD. But here's where the mystery deepens. If time itself was edited, what forbidden knowledge might have been erased alongside it? Enter Pope Sylvester Roman II, the so-called magician pope. His legend intertwines with this missing period in ways that raise the hair on your neck. Medieval chronicles claim he owned a bronze head that could answer any question, a mechanical oracle powered by stellar arithmetic, and possibly something far darker. Arab scholars of the era described automata like this as vessels for jinn, while Byzantine texts warned of talking statues that leaked secrets best left buried. Sylvester's own writings cryptically reference the years that resist counting, and his sudden death in 1003 was marked by reports of his corpse's hands turning black, as if burned by whatever knowledge he'd bartered for. The darkest clue lies in the Gregorian calendar's leap years. Illig noted that the 10-day adjustment in 1582 should have been 13 days if you account for unrecorded celestial shifts during the missing centuries. This discrepancy suggests deliberate tampering, a cover-up not just of time but of events too dangerous to remember. What might those events have been? Consider the Carolingian Renaissance, supposedly a golden age of learning, yet its surviving manuscripts contain bizarre anomalies. A 9th-century psalter in Ossian's treasury includes marginal sketches of what look like geared mechanisms labeled Ignum Dei, God's fire, while Charlemagne's court poet Alcuin of York wrote of nights that lasted 40 moons and cities unseen by day. Could this phantom period have hosted a clandestine war against surviving pre-Christian magic? Fragments from the Abbey of St. Gall describe monks battling living shadows in the Alps, their weapons inscribed with Solomon's seals. Meanwhile, Norse sagas speak of the forgotten winter, when the sun vanished for years, an event dendrochronologists can't verify through tree rings. The most chilling artifact surfaces in a Venetian archive, a palimpsest where erased text beneath a 12th-century mass book describes the silent crusade against practitioners of the old arts, their names and deeds systematically scrubbed from records. Perhaps the greatest evidence isn't what's missing, but what lingers in the margins. A recently decoded Merovingian cipher, hidden in a cattle ledger, lists dates using an unknown epoch system that places the present year as 392 when it should be 706. This discrepancy isn't a scribble error, it's a breadcrumb, because if timekeepers could fabricate centuries, what else might they have buried? And if Sylvester Roman II really did commune with his clockwork oracle, what terrible truth did it whisper about the years we're not supposed to know existed? The past isn't just written by the victors. Sometimes it's rewritten by those terrified of what might crawl out of the gaps. The moon was high over Tivoli's vineyards in 1869 when workmen restoring Emperor Hadrian's villa pried loose a marble slab and froze. Beneath it lay not treasure but horror, 9 bent daggers arranged in a starburst, their blades fused together by centuries of rust, their handles carved into leering fawn faces. The discovery sent shivers through Rome's academics because these weren't just weapons. They were keys to a secret so terrifying the Senate had tried to erase it from history. The night marble figures danced. Ancient historians like Livy downplayed the Bacchic scandal of 1860 BC as mere moral panic, but newly deciphered graffiti from Pompeii's brothels tells a darker story. One charcoal scroll depicts a group of senators stumbling upon a midnight ritual where initiates anointed statues with bull's blood and honey. The accompanying texta soltavit cum faunus, the faun danced, matches forensic evidence from the Tivoli daggers. Residue tests in 2018 revealed traces of fermented poppy and aconite on the blades, a psychotropic cocktail known to induce shared hallucinations. But here's where science falters. The dagger's arrangement precisely mirrors dance steps described in a suppressed Bacchic hymn discovered in the Vatican's restricted archives. Too specific for coincidence, the true nightmare lies in what followed the rituals. A 1st century AD census tablet from Tibur lists 37 deaths in a single summer, all wealthy patrons of the arts, all attributed to visitations. Their symptoms: crushed ribs, spiral fractures, and in 2 cases, footprints in marble dust leading away from the bodies. Modern pathologists confirm these injuries resemble blunt force trauma from something heavy and moving. A headless statue of a satyr now in Naples Archaeological Museum adds chilling context. Its base bears scrape marks suggesting it was dragged, while its fingers, once thought broken, show where patterns consistent with gripping. Why would Rome's elite risk inviting such chaos? The answer whispers from a gold foil found curled inside one Tivoli dagger's hilt. Inscribed in minuscule Greek are the words Pyopsilon, Lambdarita Chi, Rho Omicron, Nu Omicron Upsilon, Gate of Time. Bacchic initiates believed certain statues weren't just art, they were vessels for older entities, dormant until awakened by blood and rhythm. A fresco fragment from Austria's port shows initiates circling a fawn statue with sistrums, their eyes rolled back as its stone lips part. The Vatican's own records admit this much. In 180 BC, the Senate ordered 5,000 statues smashed not for piety, but because their eyes tracked the living. The final clue comes from the daggers themselves. When conservators separated them in 1952, they noted an odd acoustic property struck together. They produced a tone matching the resonant frequency of Carrara marble. Experiments at the University of Milan proved this vibration could theoretically induce microscopic shifts in crystalline structures, enough to make stone shiver. Perhaps, but in 2021, a BBC film crew recording near Hadrian's villa captured something their audio engineer couldn't explain. 17 seconds of metallic clinking in an empty moonlit courtyard, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy and hollow taking a single step. The recording now sits in the British Museum's Paranormal Archives, labeled simply Fawn Unverified. Rome's elite thought they were playing with divine madness. The daggers suggest something worse. They succeeded, and somewhere in the moonlit ruins of Tivoli, the game might still be waiting for its next player. The Malleus Maleficarum wasn't just a manual for hunting witches, it was a factory for manufacturing guilt. Published in 1486 by Heinrich Kramer, this infamous text didn't just list signs of witchcraft, it invented them wholesale, turning everyday quirks of the human body into damning evidence of devilry. Take the so-called devil's mark, a concept Kramer popularized with chilling precision. According to his instructions, these were patches of insensitive skin where demons supposedly sucked a witch's blood. But here's the horror: every human body has natural numb spots, scars, or birthmarks. Under the malleus, a faded childhood vaccination scar or a stretch mark from pregnancy could and did send thousands to the stake. Kramer's discoveries weren't based on observation. They were cynical fabrications designed to bypass logic. The book claimed witches' tears couldn't flow, a myth tested in real trials by pricking suspects' eyes with needles. When victims inevitably cried, inquisitors declared it proof of demonic deception. Even more insidious was the swimming test, where bound suspects were thrown into water. Float and you were guilty, the water rejected your evil. Sink and you drowned innocent. Parish records from Bamberg reveal how this lose-lose scenario played out. In 1628 alone, over 600 women were tested in a single region, their fates sealed by a text that treated folklore as forensic science. The malleus didn't stop at physical proof. It weaponized psychology, insisting true witches would confess under torture because the devil loosened their tongues. Confessions extracted amidst broken bones and dislocated joints were then cited as evidence the manual was correct, a perfect circle of brutality. A Nuremberg trial log from 1589 records a midwife's confession to stealing penises and storing them in birds' nests, a claim so absurd it underscores how torture twisted reality. Yet Kramer's text treated such delirious ravings as gospel, embedding them in legal precedent. Most damning, Kramer himself was exposed as a fraud during his own early trials. Church archives in Innsbruck show he was expelled from one town for attempting to prosecute a woman for witchcraft based on fabricated evidence, years before writing the Malleus. His vengeful response doubled down. The book's later editions added even more outlandish signs, like the ability to withstand pain, a trait now recognized as shock or dissociation, or owning a cat, suddenly proof of familiars. The Malleus's legacy isn't just in the thousands it killed, but in how it corrupted truth itself. Modern forensic pathologists examining witch skeletons from Wuersburg note identical marks on multiple remains, not supernatural but the bony calluses of hard labor. Yet to a 16th century inquisitor with Kramer's text in hand, those very calluses were Satan's fingerprints. Perhaps the darkest magic wasn't in the accused, but in the book that turned ignorance into execution orders and superstition into law. And like any good spell, it only worked if you believed. No creature in Scottish folklore embodies sheer visceral horror quite like the Necronomicon, a monstrosity so vile, even the ocean itself seems to recoil from its presence. Picture this, a skinless horse fused at the spine to a grotesque humanoid torso, its exposed muscles glistening with black veins, its breath reeking of rotting kelp and sulfur. This abomination doesn't just haunt the Orkney Islands, it is the haunting, a living embodiment of the plague winds that withered crops and left fishermen's lungs clogged with saltwater foam. The Necronomic's connection to disease isn't merely symbolic. Old fishermen's logs from Stromness describe how its approach was heralded by a sudden greening of the waves, a toxic algae bloom preceding deadly respiratory outbreaks in coastal villages. During the Great Mold of 1782, witnesses swore they saw the creature galloping through fog banks, its rider's single bloodshot eye weeping a viscous fluid that turned beach pebbles into pitted leprous stones. Modern marine biologists note these accounts align with red tide events where algal toxins cause airborne irritation. But science can't explain why iron nails hammered into doorframes, a folk remedy against the Necronomicon, coincidentally prevented respiratory cases in households that used them. The iron taboo runs deep in Necronomicon lore. Unlike other Scottish spirits repelled by cold iron, this demon reacts with something closer to allergic agony. A 19th century blacksmith's journal from Sandwich details crafting wind nails, horseshoes bent into spirals and hung above cradles during outbreak seasons. The smith noted that untreated iron rusted within days when the Necronomicon was near, while the charmed nails remained unnaturally pristine. Even today, Orkney's oldest fishing boats retain a tradition, hammering a single nail through the prow, its tip smeared with cod liver oil and rowan ash. Sailors whisper that when the Necronomic's tide rises, these nails grow warm to the touch, pulsing like a warning heartbeat. Perhaps the most chilling evidence lies in the creature's mythology itself. Unlike typical demons bound to specific locations, the Necronomicon is tied to consequences. It appears where ecological balance shatters, overfished waters, cleared peat bogs, even graveyards disturbed by storms. A folk song from Westray describes it gnawing on the roots of lightning-struck trees, its saliva birthing invasive fungi that strangle native plants. This isn't just superstition. Coastal ecologists now recognize the Necronomic's legend as an uncanny metaphor for environmental collapse. When the herring fisheries collapsed in 1936, elderly islanders nodded grimly, recalling how the creature's howls were last heard before the rotten winds of 1889. So is the Necronomicon a demon, a disease vector, or nature's vengeance given form? The answer might be written in the scars of Orkney's landscape itself. Those who brave the winter tide still report a fetid stench rolling in with certain squalls, and the occasional nail, old and iron, washing ashore, bent as if chewed by something with teeth too large to belong to any fish. Some warnings don't fade, they rust, they return, and they remember. Theatre lore whispers that Shakespeare didn't just write Macbeth, he ripped it from a coven's grimoire and paid the price. From its very first performance in 1606, the play's history drips with blood and bad luck. Actors refuse to speak its name aloud, calling it the Scottish play instead, as if the title itself were a hex. But this isn't just superstition. The curse of Macbeth is woven into its very text, with real spells lifted from dark rituals and a trail of tragedies that stretch from the Globe Theatre to Hollywood soundstages. Take The Witch's Chance, those hair-raising lines that open Act 4. Double, double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. These aren't Shakespeare's inventions. They're near-verbatim incantations from the discovery of witchcraft, a 1584 text exposing real witch trials. Historians found identical phrases in Scottish trial records, where accused witches described using them to summon storms. Even the ingredients tossed into the cauldron, fillet of a fenny snake, and liver of blaspheming Jew, mirror actual folk spells for cursing enemies. When actors recite these lines, they're not just performing, they're recreating a ritual older than the play itself. The first omen came during the premiere. Court documents reveal King James I, a known witch hunter, nearly halted the show when a prop cauldron burst into real flames, nearly torching the thatched roof. Then there's the boy who played Lady Macbeth records from the period note he died mysteriously backstage, his throat slashed in a manner eerily mirroring the play's murder of Duncan. Fast forward to 1947, when actor Harold Norman insisted on performing the play authentically, including real dagger draws for Banquo's ghost scene. He didn't fake the blood. Night after night, he sliced his palm slightly deeper, until one performance the blade slipped, the wound festered. He died of sepsis weeks later, murmuring Macbeth's lines on his deathbed. Modern productions aren't spared. A 1988 staging in Berlin saw 3 separate actors break legs during the same sword fight. In 2017, a New York director ignored warnings and used a real antique dagger for the climactic duel, only for it to shatter mid-scene, sending shrapnel into the audience. Even tech crews aren't immune. A sound engineer at London's National Theatre in 2019 recorded an audio glitch during the witch's scene. Playback revealed a whisper not in the script, "Come, we'll drain him dry as hay." The microphone had been off. What makes the curse so persistent? Occult scholars point to Act 3, Scene 5, where Hecate snarls, "And you all know security is mortal's chiefest enemy." This line doesn't appear in the first folio. It was added later, possibly by another playwright, and some believe it's a literal warning left by someone who knew the play's power. Actors today still perform counter-curses, spinning 3 times, spitting over their left shoulder, or reciting lines from A Midsummer Night's Dream to break the hex. Because in Macbeth, the fiction never stays fictional for long. The play doesn't just depict witchcraft, it is witchcraft, and like any good spell, it works best when you believe. Etched into the blackened walls of Pompeii's ruins, where volcanic ash preserved a civilization's final moments, lies a puzzle that defies time: the Satyr Square. This 5-word palindrome, arranged in a perfect grid, reads the same backward, forward, upward, and down, Satyr Aripo tenet opera rotas. At first glance, it seems like a simple word game, but the truth is far stranger. This wasn't just graffiti, it was a shield. Archaeologists found it carved into door frames and hidden in the foundations of homes, always positioned as if barring entry. The ancients didn't just write these words, they wielded them like a sword against the unseen. What gives the Satyr Square its eerie power? The key lies in its symmetry, a linguistic fortress where every path loops back to itself. Medieval grimoires describe such palindromes as knots for demons, their endless recursion trapping malicious spirits in an inescapable maze of letters. But the Pompeii variant holds a darker secret. When researchers at the University of Naples scanned the square's letters under ultraviolet light in 2019, they noticed faint traces of red ochre pigment, a substance linked to blood rituals across the ancient Mediterranean. This wasn't just protection, it was a pact. Modern occultists have tried to resurrect the square's magic with chilling results. In 2017, a group in Prague etched the words onto their apartment walls in lamb's blood, hoping to create a ward against intruders. 3 days later, their security cameras captured every door in the home opening and closing simultaneously at 3 a.m., though the locks remained engaged. Even stranger, the footage time-stamp glitched, repeating the same 12-second sequence over and over, a digital echo of the square's infinite loop. Another experiment in Salem, Massachusetts, involved chanting the palindrome while walking its pattern in salt. Participants reported a sudden, suffocating silence, as if the air itself had been vacuum-sealed, and one woman claimed her reflection in the mirror mouthed the words backward without her moving. The most unsettling clue comes from Pompeii itself. Among the square's many appearances, one stands out, a crudely etched version near the city's brothel district, its letters staggered as if written in haste. Next to it, archaeologists found a skeletal hand clutching a stylus, its fingers fused to the tool by volcanic heat. The position suggested the scribe had been mid-writing when the eruption hit. But here's what chills historians: the final S was left incomplete. Was this a failed attempt to activate the square's power in desperation, or did Vesuvius interrupt something already in motion? Perhaps the answer lingers in the square's central word, tenet, Latin for he holds. It forms a cross at the grid's heart, intersecting all other words. This isn't just structure, it's a metaphor. The square doesn't just repel evil, it contains it, folding chaos into order like a cosmic restraining order. Yet modern linguists note an oddity. Aripo, the second word, appears nowhere else in ancient texts. Some believe it's a name, others a cipher. But a handful of occult researchers insist it's a key, a sound meant to be vibrated at a frequency that locks the square's power. The mystery deepens with every discovery. In 2021, a team decoding Herculaneum scrolls found a charred fragment referencing the square as the loom of the fates, its letters weaving destiny itself. If true, the Satyr Square isn't just a relic, it's a machine humming silently beneath the surface of history, waiting for someone to speak its words in the right order, at the right time, with the right intent. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the ashes of Pompeii still whisper them, not as a warning, but as an invitation. From cursed grimoires to dancing plagues, from living statues to skinless horsemen of the deep, these legends of forbidden magic share one terrifying truth: the moment humans reach beyond what's allowed, something reaches back. And it doesn't let go. What makes these stories endure isn't just their shock value, it's the unsettling whisper behind them, the idea that certain doors, once opened, can't be shut. The Necronomicon's cosmic horrors, the golem's hollow eyes, the Nucalevi's rotting breath, they all tap into a primal fear that knowledge, power, even curiosity have limits. And somewhere in the dark, those limits have teeth. But here's the real horror: forbidden magic isn't locked in the past, it's a mirror. The Bell Witch's bargains echo in today's obsession with viral curses. The Satyr Square's labyrinthine letters resurface in ARGs and creepypasta. Even the Malleus Maleficarum's twisted logic finds new life in modern witch hunts disguised as justice. These legends persist because they're not about spells, they're about us. What happens when ambition outruns ethics? When desperation outweighs fear? When the cost of power isn't just paid in gold, but in pieces of the soul? So tell us, which of these 30 legends left you staring at the shadows a little longer? Was it the way Baba Yaga's hut creaked on its bone-white legs? The way the Ko-Ainor's curse outlived empires, or the moment you realized the Macbeth actor's whispers weren't just lines, but a ritual older than Shakespeare himself? The comments are open if you dare, because the darkest magic isn't in the tales we tell. It's in the way they cling to us long after the last word fades. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point.